Hey guys, in this video we're going to cover how to use the reverb, delay, and modulation insert effects included with Cubase 12. These tools will be used to add a lot of depth to our tracks, and we'll use them as both inserts and sends on our channels, so make sure you've checked out the previous videos so you're familiar with how to set this all up. To start, let's go to the top menu and switch to the Mix Console view. We can create the send as we did earlier in the tutorial series. We'll select the send on our channel, turn it on, and add the insert on that effects track, such as the reverb. We'll only do this for the reverb as the modulation and delay effects will be added as an insert directly on the respective tracks. For the reverb tools, we have Roomworks SE included with all versions of Cubase 12. Roomworks is included with the Elements, Artist, and Pro versions. Revelation is included with the Artist and Pro versions, and Reverence is only included in the Pro version. Now normally I apply the reverb on a send track and combine all the different tracks together before processing, but for demonstration purposes I'm going to use it as an insert on the guitar group bus. That way I can use 100% wet mix to show how the controls affect the sound without the dry signal being heard and interfering with just the processing. If using it as a send, I wouldn't have an easy way to do this by eliminating the dry signal. The Roomworks plugin is a simple EQ included with Cubase 12. On the left, we have controls for the high and low shelf EQ with frequency adjustments at the top and level adjustments at the bottom. This has a pre-delay for when the reverb starts, a room size, and a reverb time to adjust the overall size of the room. Diffusion helps make the reverb smoother at the cost of making it sound less clear. The width adjusts the stereo width of the reverb. Variation creates a different reflection pattern if the one we're using creates problematic ringing sounds and interferes with our recording. The next section gives us damping for the low and high frequencies in relation to the mid frequencies. If we set this to be less than 100%, they will decay out faster, and with it more than 100%, they will decay slowly. The frequency that this is done at can be changed with the low and high frequency knobs. The envelope is used to adjust the attack and release. The attack sets how quickly the reverb reaches full volume, and the release sets how long it takes to cut off the reverb. The output section has a control for wet and dry mix, or a wet only button if you're using it on an auxiliary send track. The efficiency knob controls how much CPU power the Roomworks plugin uses, but sacrifices the quality of the effect. The export button makes it use maximum quality when exporting the song. The Roomworks SE plugin is a stripped down version of Roomworks. The controls we get are pre-delay, which determines the time before the reverb starts, reverb time for the length of the reverb in seconds, diffusion, low and high decay time, and mix percentage. The Revelation plugin is an algorithmic reverb. On the left, we have a slider for a pre-delay which adjusts the amount of time before the delay starts to simulate a larger room. We also have a mix knob for the early reflections and tail of the reverb. This helps adjust the distance of the track in the room, with a higher early reflection mix resulting in a closer reverb sound, and if we have it set farther away, then we'll hear more late reflections. In the middle, we have input and output level meters. Between them is the waveform for the reverb with the drop-down selector above that lets us select the early reflection type and determine the room shape and size. The bottom knobs control some of the characteristics of the early reflections and the tail. For the early reflections, we can adjust the size or length of the early reflections, as well as the high and low frequency cut. Next, for the tail, we have the time delay that delays the onset after the early reflections, and the size of the room the tail is simulating. The shape is the attack of the reverb, with 0% being high attack, and a higher percentage having a slower start or attack of the reverb. Next, we can adjust the density, high cut, and width of the reverb tail. The high and low time change the time those frequencies are included in the reverb, and the high and low frequency knobs control their boundaries. On the right side, we have the output level control and the wet-dry mix. With 100% wet mix, we'll hear only the reverb sound without any unprocessed signal. This is great if you're using the reverb send on an auxiliary track. The Reverence plugin in Cubase 12 uses an impulse response recorded in a real room that can then be applied to the track to simulate the sound of that room. To work this, we see there's 36 numbered buttons lined up in the top right. We can click each of them to load that from the program matrix. Each of these boxes can hold a specific impulse program with the settings down below, and that can all be changed by flipping between the different boxes and clicking on them. Double-click a box to select a program for it. Although this reverb plugin can get quite complex to work with, some of the important tools to know about are the pre-delay, time scaling, size, level, ER tail split, and ER tail mix. The pre-delay is the time before the reverb starts. Time scaling controls how long the reverb is and can compress the impulse or extend it out. Size is the size of the room. Level is the volume of the reverb, and ER tail split and mix adjust the time and levels between what is considered early reflection and tail of the reverb. Towards the right, we have frequency controls for the reverb with a frequency selector and a level control. At the far bottom right, we can control the wet-dry mix of the reverb. With the delay effects, mono delay is included with all versions of Cubase 12, but stereo delay and ping pong delay are only available in the Elements, Artist, and Pro versions. The simplest delay we can work with is called the mono delay. This plugin creates a series of single delay sounds without too much modification. On the left, we have high and low filter to remove some of those frequencies from being processed by the delay. The middle gives us the timing, which can be in milliseconds or synced to the project timing. The feedback time adjusts how much of our delayed signal is processed by the delay over again, giving us a larger number of repeats if it's increased. The mix sets the blend between the dry signal and the wet delay signal. Next is the ping pong delay. The controls for this are similar to the mono delay, except that the delay alternates between left and right in stereo. With that said, this delay must be placed on a stereo track. You can use it with a mono recording, but the channel that it's sent through must be stereo. For additional controls, we simply get a stereo width, which determines how far the delays are panned, and a button to choose if the delay starts on the left or the right. The stereo delay again gives us a high and low filter, delay time with sync, feedback and mix controls, but this time it's split into left and right delay with pan controls for each, allowing us to create two separate delays with their own timing. The chorus, flanger, phaser, and tremolo effects are included with all versions of Cubase 12. The chorus effect is made to make a single recording sound like multiple instruments are played at once, with a slight variation in timing and pitch. For this effect, we start with the delay time for the frequency range affected, width, which sets the depth and amount of chorus applied, spatial to set the stereo spacing, and mix to adjust the combination between the processed and unprocessed signal, with the strongest chorus sound being at 50%. In the middle, we also have timing, which can be set to sync with the project timing. The waveform shape adjusts the oscillation to be a sine wave or a triangle wave, and the low and high filter are used to cut off some of the frequencies. The flanger effect is used to create a sweeping jet plane type of sound across the frequency spectrum by playing the track with a very slight delay and modulating that delay time. With this effect, we have a delay for the frequency range, feedback for the character of the flanger, mode for LFO versus manual, and we can sync this with the project timing or manually set that sweep. Spatial again controls the stereo width, and mix adjusts the wet and dry balance. Low and high range set the boundaries of the flanger's sweeping sound. Waveform shape adjusts the sweep from sine to triangle wave. Low and high filter can roll off the low and high frequencies of the effect. The phaser effect is another tool we can use to make a sweeping sound without that jet plane effect that the flanger creates. For controls, we get feedback, width, rate, sync, spatial, mix, and low and high filter. Feedback and width are used to adjust the intensity and amount of phaser effect being applied. In the center, we have controls for the speed of the oscillation with LFO and manual mode at the top, and the rate is set in the middle control with the sync versus milliseconds with a button. Spatial creates separation in stereo space with the delay effect. Mix adjusts the dry and wet signal with the high intensity of the phaser effect being at 50% if it's an insert and 100% if it's an aux send. Low and high filter are used to roll off the high and low frequencies. The tremolo effect rapidly oscillates the volume of our track. The rate adjusts how fast the oscillation goes, and the sync allows us to switch between a frequency and note value timing. Depth determines how much the amplitude or volume of the tremolo applies, so at 100% it dips all the way down to 0, and at 0% there is no tremolo applied. Spatial creates the stereo effect, and output adjusts the volume level. Thanks for checking out this video on using the reverb, delay, and modulation effects in Cubase 12. If this video helped you out, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and press the bell icon to get notifications whenever a new video is released. You can also check the video description for social media accounts to keep up with all our new content.